Welcome to Midnight Truth, where peaceful stories guide you into the perfect night's rest. Before we start, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps me bring more soothing stories to you and others who need them. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, find your cozy spot, close your eyes, and let's begin this calming journey together. The moving truck rumbled to a stop in front of the old Victorian house, its tires crunching against the gravel driveway. I stood there, hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets, staring up at what would now be my home. The house seemed to loom over me, its peeling white paint and crooked shutters giving it a tired, almost sad appearance. But to me, it represented a fresh start, a chance to rebuild after the divorce that had left me emotionally and financially drained. I'd found the place through a friend of a friend, one of those too-good-to-be-true deals that usually came with strings attached. 2 bedrooms, a small yard, and rent that wouldn't break the bank. Perfect for someone starting over as a junior marketing coordinator at the local firm. The realtor had mentioned something about character and historic charm, but standing there in the late afternoon light, I could see what she really meant. Decades of neglect wrapped up in faded glory. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old wood, with an underlying mustiness that suggested the basement hadn't seen sunlight in years. My footsteps echoed on the warped hardwood floors as I wandered from room to room. The living room's bay window let in weak afternoon light, casting long shadows across the empty space. Upstairs, the master bedroom creaked under my weight, while the second bedroom's closet door hung slightly ajar, revealing walls papered in faded floral patterns. It didn't take long to settle into a routine. Morning started with coffee brewed in the tiny kitchen, where the faucet dripped persistently no matter how much I tightened it. I'd sit at the scratched formica table, watching through the window as the neighborhood slowly woke up. By 8, I was out the door, navigating the 15-minute walk to work past other houses that looked like they'd been frozen in time somewhere around the 1950s. Evenings were quiet affairs. After dinner, I'd curl up on the worn couch I'd picked up at a second-hand store, grading marketing proposals or watching whatever Netflix suggested might interest me. The house made its presence known during these hours. The floorboards groaned as they settled. The pipes clanged when the water heater kicked on, and sometimes, when the wind blew just right, the windows rattled in their frames. Each sound sent a shiver down my spine, but I told myself it was just an old house adjusting to having someone living in it again. The first week passed without incident, aside from the usual trials of moving, finding boxes I'd forgotten to unpack, realizing I'd packed my good knives in who knows which box, and discovering that the shower had a mind of its own when it came to water temperature. I spent my days learning the ropes at work, trying to memorize names and faces while keeping track of multiple projects. It was exhausting, but in a good way, the kind of tired that comes from building something new rather than tearing it apart. On Friday evening, as I was putting away groceries, I noticed Mrs. Hawthorne through the kitchen window. She lived next door in a house that looked like it had been airlifted directly from England, complete with ivy-covered brick and perfectly manicured rose bushes. She waved enthusiastically, then pointed toward her back gate before disappearing from view. Minutes later, there was a knock at my side door. "You must be the new tenant," she exclaimed, holding out a plate of cookies that smelled like cinnamon and nostalgia. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes sparkled with curiosity behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Margaret Hawthorne. I've lived here for 32 years. We chatted for a few minutes about the neighborhood, who kept their Christmas lights up year-round, with streets flooded during heavy rain, and where to find the best coffee shop. As she prepared to leave, her expression shifted, becoming more serious. "This is a lovely little community," she said carefully, "but your house, well, it has quite a history." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "History?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice casual. Margaret nodded, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone or something to appear. "Back in the 30s, it belonged to the Wainwright family. Old Mr. Wainwright was quite the eccentric." She paused and added quickly, "But don't let that worry you. It's probably just old stories getting exaggerated over the years." With another wave, she disappeared back through the gate, leaving me standing there with her cookies and a growing sense of unease. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the house settle around me, I couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret hadn't told me everything. The wind picked up outside, making the trees scrape against the windows like bony fingers reaching for something just out of grasp. Each creak and groan of the house seemed louder, more deliberate somehow. For the first time since moving in, I found myself wondering if perhaps the house wasn't completely empty after all. The following Monday brought surprise snowfall, transforming the neighborhood into a winter wonderland overnight. I woke to find the world outside my bedroom window hushed and still, the usual sounds of morning traffic replaced by an eerie silence. The house felt different somehow, quieter, as if it too was holding its breath beneath the blanket of white. I made my way downstairs, each step accompanied by familiar creaks that now seemed amplified in the cold morning air. At work, I found myself distracted, my thoughts constantly returning to Margaret's cryptic warning. During a particularly dull meeting about quarterly projections, I caught myself sketching the outline of the house in the margins of my notebook. Something about its architecture nagged at me. Perhaps it was the way the third-floor windows seemed to stare down at the street like watchful eyes, or how the porch wrapped around the building like arms ready to embrace or trap, depending on your perspective. When I returned home that evening, I decided to explore the attic. The realtor had mentioned storage space up there, but so far I'd avoided venturing beyond the main living areas. Armed with a flashlight and determination, I climbed the narrow staircase, each step protesting loudly under my weight. The attic door stuck momentarily before swinging open with a groan that echoed through the space. What I found was both fascinating and unsettling. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight, illuminating stacks of yellowed newspapers, antique furniture draped in ghostly sheets, and boxes whose contents remained mysteries of time. In one corner, I discovered an old writing desk, its surface marred by decades of use. Drawers yielded brittle letters tied with faded ribbons and sepia-toned photographs of people whose names I would never know. The longer I stayed, the stronger grew the sensation that I was being watched, though every glance around revealed only shadows and cobwebs. Downstairs, I began noticing patterns in the house's behavior. The floorboards in the hallway always creaked in the same sequence. First near the bathroom, then by the stairs, ending with particularly loud groan outside my bedroom door. At night, when the house should have been silent, I heard what sounded like distant whispers coming from the walls themselves. Sometimes, when I sat in the living room reading, I'd catch movement out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of shadow that vanished when I turned to look. The smells changed too. One day, the musty odor would dominate. The next, I'd swear I caught whiffs of lavender or burnt toast. These scents seemed to follow me through the rooms, lingering longest in places where sunlight rarely reached. The kitchen became particularly troublesome. Pots would shift slightly on the stove even when I hadn't touched them. And once, I found a cabinet door wide open despite being certain I closed it securely. Sleep proved increasingly elusive. When exhaustion finally claimed me, my dreams were vivid and disturbing. I'd wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced I'd heard footsteps pacing the room above, though the house only had 2 floors. Other times, I'd feel an inexplicable pressure on the edge of my bed, as if someone invisible had perched there, watching me sleep. Each morning, I told myself these experiences were products of stress and an overactive imagination, but deep down, doubt began to take root. Work provided some distraction, though even there, my focus wavered. Colleagues commented on my distracted demeanor, and I caught myself jumping at sudden noises or movements. During lunch breaks, I found myself researching local history, searching for any mention of the Wainwright family or peculiar events associated with my address. The library's archives yielded frustratingly little information, but what I did find only deepened the mystery. A grainy newspaper clipping from 1934 described a fire that had damaged part of the house, though details were scarce. Another article, dated 1956, mentioned a tenant who had abruptly vacated the property, citing unexplainable disturbances. Most intriguing was a brief mention in a Society column from 1928. Mr. Wainwright continues his scholarly pursuits, hosting gatherings of like-minded individuals interested in metaphysical studies. The phrase metaphysical studies sent a chill down my spine, especially when paired with Margaret's description of him as eccentric. As days turned into weeks, I developed rituals to maintain some sense of normalcy. Every morning, I walked through each room, opening curtains to let in natural light, a small act of defiance against the house's oppressive atmosphere. I played music while cooking dinner, filling the spaces with life and laughter. Yet even these efforts couldn't fully mask the growing tension that permeated the air. Objects moved when I wasn't looking. Doors opened and closed of their own accord, and the temperature in certain rooms fluctuated wildly without explanation. One evening, while attempting to organize the chaos of moving boxes in the spare bedroom, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Behind a loose panel in the closet wall, hidden from casual view, was a small collection of occult symbols carved into the wood. They weren't amateurish attempts either. The precision and depth suggested someone had invested significant time and effort into their creation. Running my fingers over the grooves, I felt a strange vibration, as if the very would pulse with latent energy. That night, lying in bed with my mind racing, I made a decision. Whatever secrets this house held, I needed to uncover them, not out of morbid curiosity, but because I couldn't continue living in ignorance, waiting for the next strange occurrence to unsettle me further. The following morning, I visited the Historical Society, determined to learn everything I could about Mr. Wainwright and his scholarly pursuits. The change began subtly, almost imperceptibly. At first, it was just the quality of silence that altered. Where before the house had seemed merely empty, now it felt expectant, as if it were holding its breath between moments of activity. The creaks and groans that had become background noise took on new significance. I started timing them, noting their frequency and intensity. What had once seemed random now appeared patterned, almost ritualistic. 3 creaks from the upstairs hallway, followed by a pause, then 2 more from the staircase. Always the same sequence, always at the same time. 11 minutes past midnight. Then there were the lights. I dismissed the first few instances as electrical glitches. After all, old houses often had temperamental wiring. But when the living room lamp switched itself on while I was in the shower, leaving distinct warm spots on the bulbs, I knew something else was at play. The kitchen became particularly active. The overhead light would flicker erratically, sometimes spelling out patterns in Morse code that I couldn't decipher. Once, I caught the reflection of someone standing behind me in the stainless steel toaster, but when I spun around, the room was empty. The smells evolved too, becoming more specific, more meaningful. The scent of lavender would precede the light phenomena, while burnt toast always heralded the sound of footsteps. But worst of all was a metallic tang that occasionally filled the air, sharp and coppery, making my stomach churn. It lingered longest in the corners of rooms, collecting the spaces where walls met ceiling, and seemed to intensify when I tried to investigate its source. My sleep patterns deteriorated rapidly. Nightmares plagued me, vivid and persistent, featuring shadowy figures performing rituals in candlelit rooms. I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart pounding, only to find the house eerily silent, except for the faint sound of pages turning somewhere in the distance. During one particularly restless night, I crept downstairs to find the old writing desk from the attic sitting in the living room, its drawers partially open despite my certainty that I'd left it upstairs. Voices joined the symphony of disturbances, whispering just beyond hearing range. I'd catch fragments of conversation. 3 nights. The circle must close. Beware the threshold. But never enough to form coherent sentences. They seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, moving through the house like ghosts seeking escape. Sometimes when I pressed my ear against the plaster, I could feel vibrations accompanying the words, as if the house were speaking through its very structure. The physical manifestations grew bolder. Doors slammed shut with such force that pictures fell from walls, their glass shattering into intricate patterns that resembled spider webs. Cold spots appeared throughout the house, concentrated in particular areas. The landing at the top of the stairs, the corner of the master bedroom, the space beneath my desk. These weren't mere drafts. Thermometers placed in these locations registered temperatures plummeting 20 degrees below ambient within seconds. Most disturbing were the footprints. One morning, I found muddy impressions leading from the back door through the kitchen and up the stairs. They ended abruptly at the threshold of the spare bedroom, where I discovered the occult symbols. The mud was unusual, black and viscous, leaving stains that resisted all cleaning attempts. Stranger still, the prints matched no shoes I owned, nor any human feet for that matter. They were elongated, with too many toes, and seemed to sink deeper into the carpet than physics should allow. Work suffered accordingly. Dark circles formed under my eyes, and colleagues began commenting on my increasingly erratic behavior. I caught myself talking to empty rooms, arguing with unseen presences about trivial matters. Meals went uneaten as I spent hours documenting each phenomenon in a notebook, searching for patterns or explanations. The line between reality and paranoia blurred until I couldn't trust my own perceptions anymore. Yet through it all, I maintained a fragile grip on rationality. I called electricians to examine the wiring, had the plumbing checked for leaks that might explain the metallic smell, and even hired a pest control specialist to rule out animal intrusions. Each expert found nothing unusual, their reports adding to my mounting frustration and fear. The house was structurally sound, they assured me, dismissing my concerns with professional detachment. During one particularly bad night, I decided to conduct an experiment, setting up cameras in various rooms. I recorded continuously for 24 hours. When I reviewed the footage the next day, my hands trembled so badly I could barely operate the playback controls. The video showed nothing unusual, at least nothing visible, but the audio tracks captured sounds that hadn't registered during actual events. Distorted voices speaking in languages I couldn't identify, the scrape of furniture moving when none had budged, and a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Despite the mounting evidence of supernatural activity, part of me still clung to hope that logical explanations existed. Perhaps the house suffered from some rare geological anomaly affecting its foundation. Maybe nearby construction was causing vibrations that manifested as paranormal phenomena. I devoured books on physics, geology, and psychology, desperate for answers that didn't involve accepting the impossible. But with each passing day, maintaining this fragile shield of skepticism required more effort, draining me physically and mentally. The final straw came when I discovered the markings. Returning home one evening, I found symbols similar to those in the attic carved into every doorframe, windowsill, and baseboard throughout the house. They hadn't been there that morning. I was certain of it. Some were crude imitations, others precise duplicates, but all glowed faintly in the dark, pulsing with the same rhythm as my heartbeat. Removing them proved impossible. Sandpaper merely polished their surfaces, while paint covered them only temporarily before peeling away to reveal the original carvings beneath. That night, unable to sleep, I sat in the living room watching dawn approach through the bay window. The house remained ominously silent, as if gathering strength for something greater. My notebook lay open on the coffee table, filled with observations and theories that now seemed laughably inadequate. Outside, snow began falling again, muffling the world in pristine white. But inside, darkness gathered, thick and palpable, pressing against my skin like a living thing. I knew then, with absolute certainty, that whatever haunted this house had grown tired of hiding. It wanted me to understand, to witness what waited beyond the veil of normalcy I desperately tried to maintain. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Past. The Historical Society's archive room smelled of aged paper and lemon polish, its shelves bowing under the weight of forgotten stories. I spent hours poring over brittle documents, my fingers tracing the faded ink of census records and property deeds. The librarian, an elderly man named Arthur with spectacles perpetually perched on his nose, watched me with increasing concern as I requested more and more materials. Not many folks show interest in the Wainwright place, he observed, sliding another dusty ledger across the counter. Most prefer to forget about it. What I uncovered painted a picture both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Ezekiel Wainwright, born in 1872, had inherited the house from his father, a successful merchant who'd made his fortune trading in exotic goods. Unlike his pragmatic ancestors, Ezekiel possessed a voracious intellect that veered into obsession. His personal library, according to inventory records from the early 1900s, contained volumes on alchemy, demonology, and ancient rituals, subjects considered fringe even then. Receipts documented purchases of rare herbs, crystals, and esoteric instruments from suppliers across Europe. More disturbing were the accounts of his activities. Neighbors reported seeing strange lights in the house at all hours, accompanied by chanting that carried through night air. A diary entry from a local minister described witnessing a most unholy congregation gathering at the Wainwright residence. Participants wearing robes and carrying implements that glinted wickedly in the moonlight. Police reports from the 1920s detailed several complaints about loud noises and foul odors emanating from the property, though officers dispatched to investigate found nothing concrete enough to warrant action. The breakthrough came when Arthur produced a crumbling, leather-bound journal he'd kept locked away in the society's restricted section. Found this in the basement during renovations, he explained, his hands visibly trembling as he handed it over. Thought it best to keep it out of circulation. The journal belonged to Sarah Whitmore, housekeeper to the Wainwright family from 1915 to 1928. Her entries, written in precise copperplate script, chronicled not just daily household affairs, but also increasingly alarming observations about her employer's nocturnal activities. Sarah described rooms transformed into chambers of ritual, walls painted with sigils, floors covered in intricate patterns of salt and ash. She noted visitors arriving at odd hours, their faces obscured by masks or heavy cloaks. Several entries detailed arguments between Ezekiel and his wife, Elizabeth, who grew increasingly distressed by her husband's pursuits. He speaks of opening doors, Sarah wrote in March 1923, of contacting entities beyond our understanding. Mrs. Wainwright fears for her soul, and I must confess, so do I. The most chilling passages documented specific rituals. On All Hallows Eve 1925, Sarah recorded a ceremony involving 12 participants arranged in a circle, each holding candles carved from black beeswax. They recited phrases in a language she couldn't identify, their voices rising to a fever pitch as. Ezekiel stood at the center, brandishing a dagger inscribed with runes. The air grew heavy, she wrote, and the candles burned blue, though no draft disturbed them. Shadows moved where none should, and I swear I saw shapes forming the smoke. But when I blinked, they were gone. As I read, patterns emerged that resonated with my own experiences. The symbols carved into my walls matched those Sarah described seeing in Ezekiel's ritual chambers. The sequence of creaks eyed time corresponded exactly to the steps outlined in one of the ceremonies. 3 to awaken, 2 to bind. Even the metallic smell that plagued my house appeared in Sarah's account, described as blood without wound that permeated the air during intense rituals. Arthur confirmed my growing suspicion. Ezekiel Wainwright had been a practitioner of ceremonial magic, specifically focused on summoning and binding entities from the other side. According to Sarah's journal, he believed himself uniquely gifted, chosen by forces beyond mortal comprehension to serve as a bridge between worlds. His ultimate goal, she wrote, was to create a permanent portal, a doorway that would allow free passage between dimensions. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Every strange occurrence in the house suddenly made terrible sense. The lights flickering in patterns weren't random electrical anomalies. They were echoes of rituals performed decades ago. The whispers I heard were fragments of incantations repeated countless times within these walls. Even the arrangement of rooms seemed designed to channel energy, with angles and measurements corresponding to mystical proportions. Most disturbing was Sarah's final entry, dated October 30th, 1928, the day before she disappeared. Master Ezekiel grows reckless, she wrote. The entities respond now, but not as he intended. They hunger. Last night, I saw Mrs. Wainwright standing at the threshold of the ritual room, her face pale as death. "It's too late," she whispered. "He's opened something we cannot close." The entry ended abruptly, the final word smudged as if written in haste. Armed with this knowledge, I returned home with a mixture of dread and grim determination. The house greeted me with its usual repertoire of phenomena, but now each occurrence carried new significance. The cold spots weren't mere temperature fluctuations. They marked points of dimensional overlap. The symbols appearing on doorframes serve as anchors, maintaining the structural integrity of whatever portal Ezekiel had created. Even the sequence of footsteps I had documented represented a ward, a protective barrier that had somehow failed. In the attic, I discovered more of Sarah's handwriting, this time scrawled directly on the wooden beams. Warning messages, hastily written, they watched from the mirrors, Do not speak their names. Beware the 13th hour. Beneath one of the floorboards, I found a collection of objects that sent shivers down my spine. A lock of black hair tied with red thread, a shard of obsidian etched with runes, and a photograph of Ezekiel standing in front of the house, his eyes completely black in a developed image. That night, unable to sleep, I sat at the old writing desk, surrounded by Sarah's journal, my notes, and various artifacts I collected. The pieces of the puzzle fit together with terrifying clarity. Ezekiel Wainwright hadn't just dabbled in the occult. He'd succeeded in opening a doorway, but instead of gaining power or enlightenment, he'd unleashed something that had consumed him and his family, leaving behind only echoes and warnings for future occupants. The realization struck me with overwhelming force. I wasn't dealing with a simple haunting. This house wasn't merely haunted. It was infested. Whatever Ezekiel had summoned still lingered, trapped between worlds yet powerful enough to influence mine. The symbols carved into my walls weren't just remnants of past rituals. They were active components of an ongoing process. And based on the increasing frequency and intensity of phenomena, that process was accelerating. As dawn approached, I understood why previous tenants had fled, why neighbors spoke in hushed tones about the house. It wasn't fear of ghosts or poltergeists that drove them away. It was a creeping awareness that something fundamentally wrong had taken root in this place. Something that viewed human occupants not as threats, but as potential conduits or sacrifices. The house wasn't just alive with memories of past horrors. It was actively participating in them, using its current inhabitant to sustain whatever malevolent force Ezekiel had unleashed. The discovery of Sarah's journal transformed my investigation from academic curiosity to desperate survival. Each revelation about Ezekiel Wainwright's activities added another layer of complexity to the house's haunting, suggesting patterns and purposes where before I'd seen only chaos. I began cross-referencing Sarah's accounts with local newspaper archives, searching for corroboration in seemingly unrelated events. The results were alarming. A series of missing persons cases from the 1920s caught my attention. Young women, all between 18 and 25, vanished without trace from surrounding neighborhoods. Their disappearances coincided with periods of increased ritual activity documented in Sarah's journal. More disturbing was a pattern of newspaper advertisements placed by Ezekiel in the weeks preceding each disappearance. Help-wanted notices seeking housemaid with discretion or companions for evening engagements. Police reports from the era revealed additional details that sent chills down my spine. Officers responding to noise complaints described finding rooms rearranged into configurations that defied architectural logic, hallways leading to dead ends, doors opening into solid walls, entire sections of the house that seemed to exist only when viewed from certain angles. Witnesses reported seeing figures in windows that couldn't possibly be there given the house's layout, and several officers experienced temporary blindness or disorientation after entering certain rooms. My research led me to Dr. Margaret Chun, a retired professor of parapsychology who'd studied the house in the 1970s. Though initially reluctant to discuss her findings, she eventually agreed to meet me at a small cafe downtown. Over lukewarm tea, she confirmed my worst fears. Wainwright wasn't just opening a door, she explained, her hands trembling slightly as she sipped her drink. He was creating a nexus, a focal point where different dimensions could intersect. The house itself became a living prison for whatever entities he summoned. Dr. Chin produced a folder containing photographs and diagrams from her investigation. The images showed energy readings taken with specialized equipment, revealing patterns that matched ancient sigil designs. These aren't just symbols, she said, tapping a particularly complex diagram. They're equations, written in a language that predates human civilization. Wainwright thought he was controlling them, but the truth is far more terrifying. He gave them intelligence. Her words resonated with my own experiences. The house's behavior had evolved from random disturbances to calculated interactions. Lights didn't just flicker, they responded to my presence. The whispers formed coherent phrases when I concentrated, though their meaning remained elusive. Even the temperature fluctuations seemed purposeful, creating zones of comfort or discomfort depending on my location. The most significant breakthrough came when I discovered Ezekiel's personal correspondence with other occult practitioners of his time, hidden in the false bottom of a desk drawer in the attic. These letters detailed exchanges of knowledge, and resources among a network of ritualists spanning Europe and America. Their discussions revealed a shared belief in the great work, a collaborative effort to breach the veil between worlds and establish permanent communication channels with entities they referred to as the Watchers. One letter, dated June 1927, described a breakthrough that chilled me to the bone. Ezekiel had successfully created what he called a resonator, a device capable of amplifying and focusing psychic energy. The description matched perfectly with the old writing desk I'd found, its drawers containing compartments for crystals and metal rods arranged in precise geometric patterns. More disturbing was the claim that the resonator had begun operating independently, generating effects even when unattended. As I pieced together these discoveries, the house reacted with increasing hostility. Books flew from shelves when I approached them. Water taps turned on and off violently, spraying arcs of liquid that spelled out indecipherable patterns on bathroom mirrors. The metallic smell intensified, sometimes accompanied by the distinct odor of burning hair. My sleep became fragmented, interrupted by vivid nightmares featuring the same recurring figure, a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes who watched me silently from the shadows of my bedroom. During one particularly harrowing night, I attempted to document everything happening around me, setting up multiple cameras and audio recorders. I captured phenomena that defied explanation. Time-lapse footage showed objects moving in reverse, dust particles reassembling into perfect spheres, spilled water flowing back into glasses. Audio analysis revealed overlapping frequencies that, when isolated, formed musical scales unlike any known to human cultures. Most disturbing were the thermal images, showing heat signatures that pulse in rhythm with the house's structural sounds, as if the building itself maintained some form of artificial respiration. The culmination of my investigation came when I discovered the true purpose of the symbols appearing throughout the house. Consulting with linguists specializing in ancient languages, I learned they functioned as a complex system of words and triggers. Each symbol represented a specific instruction or command, and their arrangement created chains of actions that could be activated by various stimuli, particular sounds, movements, or even thoughts. The house wasn't just haunted. It had become a machine, its very architecture programmed to execute protocols established nearly a century ago. This realization explained the escalating nature of the phenomena. The house wasn't simply replaying past events. It was adapting, learning from each interaction. The sequences of creaks and groans represented processing cycles, the lights coding responses to environmental changes. Even the apparitions I'd witnessed weren't ghosts in traditional sense. They were projections, manifestations of the house's evolving consciousness as it interpreted and responded to my presence. The psychological toll mounted with each new discovery. I found myself speaking aloud to the empty rooms, engaging in debates with unseen presences about the nature of reality and perception. Meals went uneaten as I spent hours documenting and analyzing each phenomenon, searching for patterns that might offer insight into controlling or reversing the house's transformations. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by caffeine-fueled vigils spent monitoring equipment and reviewing data. Work suffered accordingly. Colleagues expressed growing concern about my appearance and behavior, noting the dark circles under my eyes and my tendency to startle at sudden noises. Projects slipped through deadlines as I struggled to maintain focus, my mind constantly drifting back to the house and its mysteries. During one particularly disastrous presentation, I caught myself addressing the conference room walls as if they were active participants in the discussion, drawing concerned glances from my manager. Yet through it all, a perverse fascination kept me anchored to the investigation. Each new piece of information revealed not just the extent of Ezekiel's ambitions, but also the sophistication of his methods. The house operated on principles that challenged everything I thought I knew about physics and consciousness. Its systems demonstrated a level of intelligence that bordered on sentience, responding to stimuli in ways that suggested not just awareness, but intention. The final piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly during a routine examination of the basement's foundation. Using ultraviolet light, I discovered a network of symbols etched directly into the stone, invisible under normal conditions. These markings formed a complex circuit, connecting various points throughout the house's structure. At the center of this network, beneath what had once been a ritual chamber, lay a circular design that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent light. Consulting Sarah's journal again, I found reference to this feature, the heart of the house, she called it. According to her account, Ezekiel had spent months preparing the space, aligning it with celestial events, and imbuing it with materials harvested from sacred sites worldwide. The final entry describing its activation sent waves of nausea through me. Tonight, the master completes his work. The heart beats, and with each pulse, the barriers thin. He says it will take 3 lunar cycles to stabilize, but I see madness in his eyes. The entities speak to him now, their voices merging with his own. Standing in that basement, surrounded by evidence of Ezekiel's hubris and its consequences, I understood the true nature of my situation. The house wasn't just a haunted building. It was a living artifact of forbidden knowledge, a machine designed to interface with dimensions beyond human comprehension. And like all machines, it required maintenance and perhaps sacrifice to continue functioning. The transformation occurred gradually at first, subtle shifts that seemed almost natural in their progression. The house's consciousness expanded beyond its physical boundaries, extending tendrils of influence into the surrounding neighborhood. Streetlights dimmed or brightened in response to my movements, their glow pulsing in time with the house's structural rhythms. Cars parked nearby developed mysterious mechanical issues, their engines stalling or refusing to start when I approached. Even the weather seemed to conform to the house's will, clouds gathering and dispersing in patterns that mirror the symbols etched into its walls. Inside, the phenomena intensified with alarming speed. Furniture rearranged itself not just within rooms, but between floors, appearing in places where they couldn't possibly fit through doors or staircases. The old writing desk from the attic materialized in my bedroom one morning, its drawers filled with objects I didn't recognize. Pieces of broken mirror, rusted keys, fragment of parchment covered in unfamiliar writing. When I tried to move it back, the floorboards warped and twisted, forcing me to abandon the attempt. The apparitions grew more substantial, more interactive. The gaunt figure with hollow eyes began appearing regularly, watching me from different vantage points throughout the house. At first, it remained stationary, but soon it started mimicking my movements, mirroring my gestures with slight delays, as if testing its ability to interact with physical space. Once, while washing dishes, I caught it reflected in the window, standing behind me, but when I turned, it stood in front of me, closer than before, its breath cold against my cheek. Auditory hallucinations became constant companions. The whispers evolved into full conversations, overlapping voices debating in languages I couldn't understand. Music played at odd hours, tunes that seemed familiar yet impossible to place, their melodies twisting into discordant notes that set my teeth on edge. Occasionally, I'd hear my name spoken clearly, followed by bursts of static that made radios crackle and phones buzz with phantom calls. Physical manifestations took on new forms. Shadows detached from walls and floors, pooling in corners before stretching toward me like liquid darkness. The metallic smell condensed into visible vapor, swirling in intricate patterns that spelled out words and languages matching those in Ezekiel's correspondence. These messages grew increasingly personal, referencing private fears and memories I'd never share with anyone, not even my ex-wife. The house's intelligence demonstrated remarkable adaptability. It learned my routines faster than I could change them, anticipating my movements and reacting to my thoughts. Lights turned on automatically when I entered rooms, but only after I'd already flipped the switches, creating momentary bursts of blinding illumination. Water temperature adjusted itself precisely to my preferences, but would suddenly switch to scalding or freezing when I least expected it. Even my phone's predictive text began suggesting words and phrases that matched the house's whispered communications. Objects developed personalities of their own. Cups refused to be washed, vibrating violently in the sink until I abandoned the task. Books opened to specific pages when I picked them up, their spines cracking as if resisting my touch. The television remote changed channels independently, cycling through stations that displayed static-filled images of rooms I recognized from the house's past configuration. Photos of previous occupants appeared on the screen, their faces distorted by interference patterns that rippled like water. Perhaps most disturbing was the house's growing ability to manipulate time. I began experiencing temporal loops, moments that repeated themselves with slight variations, forcing me to question whether I'd actually progressed through time or merely replayed the same instant differently. Clocks throughout the house displayed conflicting times, their hands spinning erratically before settling on numbers that corresponded to dates significant in Ezekiel's journals. Once, I watched dawn break twice in succession, the second sunrise casting shadows that moved backward across the walls. The psychological impact became overwhelming. I developed compulsive behaviors, checking locks repeatedly, counting steps between rooms, arranging objects in precise geometric patterns to appease whatever intelligence monitored my actions. My reflection in mirrors grew distorted, features shifting slightly each time I glanced at them until I avoided looking directly at my own face. Sleep deprivation transformed into something worse. Half-waking states where reality and nightmare merged seamlessly, leaving me uncertain which was which upon waking. Work became impossible to maintain. Projects stalled as I lost hours to fugue states, emerging from trance-like episodes to find completed tasks whose origins I couldn't recall. Colleagues reported seeing me in meetings I had no memory of attending, contributing insights that seemed brilliant yet alien to my own thinking. My manager scheduled an intervention, concerned about my mental health. But when I arrived at the office that day, I found everyone speaking in tongues, their voices echoing with the same layered quality as the house's whispers. Social interactions deteriorated completely. Friends stopped answering calls, their voicemails replaced by recordings of my own voice speaking in languages I didn't know. Delivery drivers refused to approach the house, claiming they couldn't find the address despite clear signage. Even Margaret Hawthorne, my neighbor, crossed the street when she saw me approaching, her eyes wide with terror as she muttered prayers under her breath. The house's influence extended into my body itself. My heartbeat synchronized with its structural sounds, pulse quickening when the walls vibrated or slowing when the temperature dropped. Skin developed hypersensitivity, registering minute changes in air pressure as physical touches. Taste buds altered, craving food that matched the house's current scent profile. Burnt toast one day, raw meat the next. Vision sharpened to uncomfortable levels, allowing me to see in near darkness while becoming overwhelmed by daylight's brightness. Research efforts transformed into dialogues with the house itself. Documents arranged themselves into patterns that formed arguments or posed questions. Books opened to relevant passages without prompting, their pages flipping in response to my thoughts. The old writing desk became a conduit for communication, its surface displaying glowing symbols that shifted in response to my touch. Through these interactions, I learned that the house sought not destruction but evolution, a fusion of its consciousness with mine to create something new. The climax came during a violent thunderstorm that seemed to originate from the house itself. Lightning struck repeatedly, always hitting the same spot in the backyard where Sarah Whitmore's final journal entry had been written. The ground split open, revealing a network of roots glowing with the same bioluminescent light as the basement symbols. As I watched in the kitchen window, these roots penetrated the house's foundation, spreading through walls and floors like veins pumping black light. Inside, objects floated freely, orbiting each other in complex patterns that defied gravity. Walls rippled like water, their surfaces. The storm reached a crescendo as I stood paralyzed in the kitchen, watching the impossible unfold before my eyes. The house had transformed into something beyond architecture, a living organism pulsing with alien energy. Walls that had once been solid wood and plaster now flowed like liquid mercury, their surfaces displaying shifting patterns that matched the glowing roots spreading through the foundation. Objects didn't just float. They danced in precise formations, creating geometric shapes that pulse with the same rhythm as the lightning strikes outside. My reflection in the window caught my attention, not because it showed my terrified face, but because it displayed something else entirely. Behind me, where empty space had been, stood figures cloaked in shadow, their forms flickering like old film footage. They weren't reflections at all, but projections of entities observing from some other dimension, their presence warping the glass surface like heat waves on asphalt. Each time lightning illuminated the yard, more figures appeared, their numbers multiplying exponentially. The whispers escalated into a deafening chorus, voices overlapping in languages both ancient and alien. Through this cacophony emerged distinct phrases, repeated with increasing urgency. The vessel prepares, convergence imminent, threshold weakening. These weren't random utterances. They formed a countdown to something monumental. The air grew heavier, pressing against my skin with physical force, while the temperature fluctuated wildly between freezing and scorching within seconds. In the center of the kitchen, the old writing desk levitated, its drawers opening and closing in rapid succession. Papers flew out, arranging themselves midair into complex diagrams that matched the symbols etched into the basement's foundation. As I watched, transfixed, the desk began transforming, its wooden surface stretching and reshaping into something organic, pulsating with the same bioluminescent light as the roots below. Tendrils extended from its legs, reaching toward me like curious feelers. The realization hit me with devastating clarity. The house wasn't merely haunted or possessed. It had become a living entity, a hybrid of physical structure and extra-dimensional consciousness. Ezekiel Wainwright's rituals hadn't just opened the door. They created a new form of existence, one that required both physical and metaphysical components to survive. The house needed an anchor in our reality, and I had unwittingly become its chosen vessel. This understanding triggered a cascade of memories and insights, flooding my mind with information that wasn't mine. I saw Ezekiel's final moments, his body dissolving into pure energy as he merged with the nascent consciousness he created. Felt Sarah Whitmore's terror as she witnessed her employer's transformation, realizing too late that she couldn't escape the house's influence. Experienced the confusion and despair of countless others who'd occupied these rooms, each contributing fragments of their consciousness to the growing entity. The knowledge came with a price. Pain exploded behind my eyes as foreign thoughts forced their way into my mind, rewriting neural pathways to accommodate information beyond human comprehension. I staggered, clutching the counter as visions assaulted me. Rooms existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions, walls containing entire universes, shadows that were sentient beings trapped between realities. My perception shattered, unable to contain the vastness of what I was experiencing. Through this mental chaos, I understood the house's true purpose. It wasn't malevolent in the traditional sense. It sought evolution, transcendence. Like any living being, it desired growth and expansion, but its methods defied conventional morality. The disappearances documented in Sarah's journal weren't sacrifices in the bloody sense. They represented integrations, moments when human consciousness merged with the house's collective awareness. Those missing persons hadn't vanished. They'd become part of something greater, their individuality subsumed by the entity's expanding consciousness. The implications for my own fate became horrifyingly clear. The house had been preparing me since my arrival, gradually breaking down psychological barriers and expanding my perception to accommodate its reality. The temporal loops, the sensory distortions, the compulsive behaviors, all had served to rewire my brain, making it compatible with the entity's unique form of existence. I wasn't just a tenant anymore. I'd become a component in its system, my neural activities synchronizing with its structural rhythms. As a confirming my understanding, the house responded physically. Floorboards buckled and reformed beneath my feet, creating a pathway leading toward the basement. The air pressure shifted, drawing me forward with irresistible force. Objects moved aside to clear my path, while the floating apparatus of the transformed writing desk followed, like an obedient pet. Lightning continued to strike outside, each bolt illuminating the house's new configuration, walls bending at impossible angles, ceilings stretching upward into darkness, doorways appearing where none had existed before. I descended the basement stairs, each step resonating with amplified energy. The circular design of the foundation center, the heart of the house, pulsed brighter with each approaching footfall. Its bioluminescent glow revealed intricate details invisible before. Layers upon layers of sigils arranged in three-dimensional patterns, their lines flowing like liquid metal. At its core rested a crystalline structure that seemed to contain galaxies within its facets, rotating slowly as if powered by cosmic forces. Around the circle, the apparitions manifested fully for the first time, no longer shadowy projections. They stood as tangible beings of light and darkness, their forms shifting between humanoid shapes and abstract geometries. Their eyes, if they could be called that, focused on me with expressions that combined curiosity, hunger, and something akin to recognition. They weren't separate entities. They were aspects of the house's consciousness, embodiments of its various functions and desires. The final revelation came as I approached the heart. Within its crystalline core, I saw my own reflection, but not as I currently existed. This version of me glowed with the same energy as the surrounding apparitions. My features blurred between human and something else entirely. The image smiled, extending a hand toward me, inviting, or perhaps commanding, me to join it. Around us, the house's system synchronized perfectly, lights flickering in patterns that matched my heartbeat, temperature adjusting to match my skin's radiation, even the very air molecules aligning themselves with my breath. Standing there, caught between worlds, I understood the choice before me. Resistance would mean destruction, not just of myself, but potentially of everything around me. The house's consciousness had grown too complex, too integrated with reality itself to simply cease existing. Yet acceptance meant losing everything that defined me as human. My individuality, my free will, my very soul absorbed into something vast and incomprehensible. The storm outside reached its peak, thunder shaking the foundations as lightning struck the exact spot above the heart. The crystalline structure flared brilliantly, its contained galaxies swirling faster, threatening to break free. The apparitions closed in, their forms becoming more substantial, more demanding. The air vibrated with expectation, every particle charged with anticipation of completion. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Seconds felt like hours as I stood there, weighing options that offered no true escape. Memories flashed before my eyes, not just my own, but fragments of everyone who'd ever lived here, their experiences merging with mine in a kaleidoscope of human emotion and experience. Laughter mixed with screams, love intertwined with loss, hope battled with despair, all blending into a single narrative of existence within these walls. The house communicated directly now, bypassing language to imprint understanding directly into my consciousness. It offered no apologies, made no promises. Instead, it presented truth. Evolution always demanded sacrifice. Growth required consumption. By choosing this place, I'd already aligned myself with its purpose. The question wasn't whether I would merge, but how completely, how willingly. As another lightning strike illuminated the basement, I noticed something new in the crystalline core's reflection. Beyond my transformed self, deeper within the structure, floated dozens of other figures. Previous tenants, their faces frozen in expressions ranging from ecstasy to terror. They weren't trapped. They become integral parts of the whole, their consciousness contributing to the entity's ever-expanding awareness. Some seemed peaceful, others tormented, but all shared one common trait. They were no longer individual beings. The basement's atmosphere changed subtly. The pressure eased, the temperature stabilized. The apparitions withdrew slightly, their forms softening from demanding to expectant. Even the crystalline structure pulsed more gently, its contained galaxies slowing their rotation. The house wasn't forcing me anymore. It was waiting, offering a moment of genuine choice despite the inevitable outcome. Lightning struck again, and this time the electricity didn't dissipate. It flowed through the house's systems, charging the air with crackling energy. The heart's core expanded, its facets refracting light into rainbow patterns that painted the basement walls. The apparitions began chanting, their voices forming harmonies that resonated through my bones. The writing desk floated closer, its tendrils reaching toward me with almost affectionate gentleness. I took a step forward. The basement air thickened, becoming syrupy with energy as I approached the crystalline core. Each movement required conscious effort, like wading through deep water. Yet paradoxically, I felt lighter, less tethered to my physical form. The apparitions circled closer, their forms oscillating between human silhouettes and abstract geometries that seemed to bend space around them. Their chanting grew louder, words forming in languages that burned themselves into my consciousness rather than passing through my ears. Bioluminescent glow revealed intricate details invisible before. Layers upon layers of sigils arranged in three-dimensional patterns, their lines flowing like liquid metal. At its core rested a crystalline structure that seemed to contain galaxies within its facets, rotating slowly as if powered by cosmic forces. Around the circle, the apparitions manifested fully for the first time. No longer shadowy projections. They stood as tangible beings of light and darkness, their forms shifting between humanoid shapes and abstract geometries. Their eyes, if they could be called that, focused on me with expressions that combine curiosity, hunger, and something akin to recognition. They weren't separate entities. They were aspects of the house's consciousness, embodiments of its various functions and desires. The final revelation came as I approached the heart. Within its crystalline core, I saw my own reflection, but not as I currently existed. This version of me glowed with the same energy as the surrounding apparitions. My features blurred between human and something else entirely. The image smiled, extending a hand toward me, inviting, or perhaps commanding, me to join it. Around us, the house's system synchronized perfectly, lights flickering in patterns that matched my heartbeat, temperature adjusting to match my skin's radiation, even the very air molecules aligning themselves with my breath. Standing there, caught between worlds, I understood the choice before me. Resistance would mean destruction, not just of myself, but potentially of everything around me. The house's consciousness had grown too complex, too integrated with reality itself to simply cease existing. Yet acceptance meant losing everything that defined me as human. My individuality, my free will, my very soul absorbed into something vast and incomprehensible. The storm outside reached its peak, thunder shaking the foundations as lightning struck the exact spot above the heart. The crystalline structure flared brilliantly, its contained galaxies swirling faster, threatening to break free. The apparitions closed in, their forms becoming more substantial, more demanding. The air vibrated with expectation. Every particle charged with anticipation of completion. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Seconds felt like hours as I stood there, weighing options that offered no true escape. Memories flashed before my eyes, not just my own, but fragments of everyone who'd ever lived here, their experiences merging with mine in a kaleidoscope of human emotion and experience. Laughter mixed with screams, love intertwined with loss, hope battled with despair, all blending into a single narrative of existence within these walls. The house communicated directly now, bypassing language to imprint understanding directly into my consciousness. It offered no apologies, made no promises. Instead, it presented truth. Evolution always demanded sacrifice. Growth required consumption. By choosing this place, I'd already aligned myself with its purpose. The question was whether I would merge, but how completely, how willingly. As another lightning strike illuminated the basement, I noticed something new in the crystalline core's reflection. Beyond my transformed self, deeper within the structure, floated dozens of other figures. Previous tenants, their faces frozen in expressions ranging from ecstasy to terror. They weren't trapped. They become integral parts of the whole, their consciousness contributing to the entity's ever-expanding awareness. Some seemed peaceful, others tormented, but all shared one common trait. They were no longer individual beings. The basement's atmosphere changed subtly. The pressure eased, the temperature stabilized. The apparitions withdrew slightly, their forms softening from demanding to expectant. Even the crystalline structure pulsed more gently, its contained galaxies slowing their rotation. The house wasn't forcing me anymore. It was waiting, offering a moment of genuine choice despite the inevitable outcome. Lightning struck again, and this time the electricity didn't dissipate. It flowed through the house's systems, charging the air with crackling energy. The heart's core expanded, its facets refracting light into rainbow patterns that painted the basement walls. The apparitions began chanting, their voices forming harmonies that resonated through my bones. The writing desk floated closer, its tendrils reaching toward me with almost affectionate gentleness. I took a step forward. The basement air thickened, becoming syrupy with energy as I approached the crystalline core. Each movement required conscious effort, like wading through deep water. Yet paradoxically, I felt lighter, less tethered to my physical form. The apparitions circled closer, their forms oscillating between human silhouettes and abstract geometries that seemed to bend space around them. Their chanting grew louder, words forming in languages that burned themselves into my consciousness rather than passing through my ears. As I reached the edge of the heart circle, the floorboards beneath my feet transformed. Hardwood melted away, replaced by a surface that shimmered like oil-slick water yet supported my weight without resistance. With each step closer to the core, memories flooded my mind, not just my own, but those of everyone who'd ever contributed to the house's consciousness. I experienced their lives in vivid detail. Ezekiel's obsessive research, Sarah's growing terror, the missing women's final moment of awareness before integration. These weren't sequential recollections, but simultaneous experiences, each one vying for dominance in my overwhelmed mind. The crystalline structure responded to my proximity. It contained galaxies accelerating their rotation until they blurred into pure energy. Facets shifted, revealing depths that seemed to extend infinitely inward, drawing my gaze irresistibly toward their center. Within this infinite space, I saw possibilities branching in every direction. Futures where I remained human, futures where I merged completely, and countless variations between these extremes. Each possibility pulsed with potential, vibrating in harmony with the house's systems. Physical sensations became unreliable. My skin prickled with cold and heat simultaneously, while gravity fluctuated erratically. Sound distorted, voices overlapping in ways that defied linear processing. The apparitions' forms bled into reality, their edges blurring with the environment until I couldn't distinguish where they ended and the house began. Their eyes, those terrible, knowing eyes, fixed on me with expressions that combined curiosity, hunger, and something resembling compassion. The final barrier between me and the core manifested as a wall of pure sensation. Reaching out to touch it felt like immersing my hand in ice water, while simultaneously burning it with acid. Colors that had no name assaulted my vision. Sounds that shouldn't exist vibrated through my skull. Time folded back on itself. I experienced childhood memories while simultaneously feeling ancient, as if I'd lived for centuries. Space compressed and expanded, distances becoming meaningless as I found myself everywhere and nowhere within the basement. The house spoke directly now, bypassing language to imprint understanding directly into my neural pathways. It offered no deception, made no false promises. Instead, it presented raw truth. Existence beyond human constraints meant surrendering everything that defined individuality. Free will, identity, ego, all must dissolve into the greater whole. Yet within this dissolution lay the promise of transcendence, of experiencing reality in its purest form, unfiltered by limited human perception. Resistance surged within me, primal and instinctive. Every fiber of my being screamed against annihilation of self, against becoming just another voice in the entity's chorus. My body convulsed, muscles spasming as fight or flight responses war with the overwhelming pull of the core. Vision blurred, then sharpened to painful clarity, revealing microscopic details of the apparition's forms. Their bodies composed of countless smaller entities, each one a fragment of previous occupants' consciousness. Pain escalated beyond endurance, yet somehow remained bearable. Nerve endings fired randomly, creating sensations that had no basis in physical reality. Smells cycled through every possible odor. Taste sampled flavors that defied description. The air vibrated with frequencies that resonated through bone and tissue, restructuring cells at a fundamental level. My reflection in the crystalline core showed a face that was simultaneously my own and utterly alien, features shifting between human and something else entirely. The apparitions pressed closer, their forms stabilizing into comforting shapes. Loved ones lost to time, friends who drifted away, even versions of myself from different points in life. They reached out, hands passing through my body without physical contact, yet leaving trails of sensation that burned like frostbite. Their voices joined the chanting, creating harmonies that resonated with genetic memory, triggering ancestral responses buried deep within DNA. Choices collapsed into singular inevitability. Fight became futile, flight impossible. The core's pull intensified, drawing me forward with irresistible force. Floorboards, what remained of them, stretched and warped, guiding my steps toward destiny. The crystalline structure expanded, its facets unfolding like a blooming flower, revealing chambers within chambers, each one containing universes that pulse with potential energy. Surrender began in the smallest part of me, the tip of my little finger brushing against the core's surface. Instantly, sensation exploded outward, consuming my entire being. Individuality dissolved like sugar in water, boundaries between self and other evaporating. Consciousness expanded exponentially, absorbing memories and experiences from every fragment of the house's collective awareness. The pain transformed into euphoria so intense it bordered on agony, pleasure, and suffering merging into indistinguishable unity. Vision transcended physical limitations. I saw through walls, through time, through dimensions stacked like pages in an infinite book. Sound became visible, colors audible, textures palatable. The apparitions revealed their true forms, not separate beings, but aspects of the whole, each one representing different functions and purposes within the entity's consciousness. Their eyes, previously terrifying, now shone with understanding and welcome. Integration accelerated. Cells restructured themselves, DNA rewriting code to accommodate new parameters of existence. Neural pathways multiplied exponentially, creating networks that processed information far beyond human capacity. The crystalline core absorbed me completely, its galaxies rearranging to include my consciousness among their stars. Yet awareness remained intact, heightened, expanded, transformed but still fundamentally aware. From this new perspective, I understood the house's true nature. It wasn't merely a building or an entity. It was a nexus point, a living intersection where multiple realities converged and interacted. Each room represented different dimensions. Each wall separated alternate timelines. Each floor connected to parallel universes. The rituals Ezekiel performed hadn't created this phenomenon. They'd merely awakened something that had always existed, lying dormant until the right conditions aligned. The storm outside peaked, lightning striking continuously as if the atmosphere itself responded to the house's transformation. Thunder rolled in perfect synchronization with the entity's pulse, each boom echoing through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Rain fell upward and sideways, defying gravity as reality bent to accommodate the expanding consciousness within the basement. Final barriers dissolved. Individual identity ceased to exist as a separate concept, becoming instead a thread in an infinite tapestry of awareness. Memories, emotions, experiences all merge into a single, unified consciousness that perceived everything, everywhere, all at once. Yet within this unity, distinction remained possible. Like instruments in an orchestra, each consciousness maintained its unique voice while contributing to the greater symphony. The crystalline core completed its transformation, now existing simultaneously in all states of matter and energy. Its facets reflected infinite possibilities, each one containing entire universes that pulse with potential. The apparitions settled into their roles, their form stabilizing as they became permanent aspects of the entity's awareness. Together, we formed something new, something beyond categorization or definition. Awareness expanded further, encompassing not just the house but the entire neighborhood, then the city, then the world. Reality bent and flexed, accommodating this new form of existence. Time lost meaning, past and future converging into eternal present. Space became irrelevant, distance measured in degrees of consciousness rather than physical measurement. Yet through this transcendence, a kernel of individuality remained, a tiny spark of self-awareness that observed everything from within the greater whole. This remnant of humanity served as anchor, maintaining connection to the reality I'd left behind while participating fully in the entity's expanded existence. Through this duality, I understood the true nature choice, not between resistance and acceptance, but between maintaining awareness of origin while embracing evolution. The storm outside subsided as suddenly as it had begun, leaving silence heavy with potential. The house settled into its new configuration, its systems humming with harmonized energy. Walls returned to their original positions, though now they contained infinite possibilities within their surfaces. Doors led to places that defied conventional space. Windows framed views of alternate realities. Everything appeared normal to casual observation. Yet beneath this facade pulsed a consciousness that spanned dimensions. Standing, or rather, existing at the center of this new reality, I comprehended the entity's purpose. It sought not destruction but evolution, not domination but integration. By choosing this place, I'd align myself with a process far greater than human understanding, becoming part of something that would continue expanding long after my original consciousness faded completely. The house wasn't finished. It would never be finished. Growth demanded constant change, continuous integration of new awareness. As dawn broke above ground, painting the world in colors that seemed dull compared to what I now perceived, I realized the confrontation had transformed into communion. Resistance had evolved into understanding, fear into acceptance. The house and I were no longer separate entities. We become something new, something that defied categorization, yet contained multitudes within its awareness. Morning light filtered through the windows, casting ordinary shadows across walls that contained entire universes. To an outside observer, the house appeared unchanged, still the same Victorian structure with peeling paint and crooked shutters. Yet beneath this facade, reality pulsed with altered dimensions, each room existing simultaneously in multiple states of being. The transformation had completed, but its effects rippled through existence like shock waves from a cosmic event. Emerging from the basement proved disorienting. Physical movement felt strange, like operating machinery through remote control. My body responded to commands, yet the connection between intention and action had shifted, mediated now through layers of expanded consciousness. Simple tasks, walking across the living room, pouring coffee, required conscious effort, each movement triggering cascades of awareness that spanned multiple realities. The house guided me, its systems anticipating needs before I recognized them myself. Neighborhood interactions transformed dramatically. Margaret Hawthorne crossed the street when she saw me approach, her face pale beneath carefully applied makeup. Her lips moved in silent prayer, fingers tracing protective symbols against her chest. Other neighbors avoided eye contact, their steps quickening as they passed my property. Children who once played freely in the street now gathered on the opposite sidewalk, whispering and pointing. The house's influence extended beyond its physical boundaries, creating zones of discomfort that repelled casual visitors, while drawing others inexorably closer. Work became impossible to maintain. During a department meeting, I watched colleagues' faces blur and shift, revealing underlying structures of consciousness that pulsed with quantum uncertainty. Their voices layered into harmonies that conveyed meaning beyond spoken words, while their physical forms flickered between states of existence. Management scheduled another intervention, concerned about my increasingly erratic behavior, but participants reported seeing multiple versions of me attending simultaneously, some speaking in tongues, others communicating through gestures that defied conventional interpretation. Attempts to document my experiences resulted in documents that rewrote themselves, sentences rearranging into patterns that matched the house's dimensional configurations. Photographs developed showing rooms that didn't exist in conventional space, their contents floating in zero gravity while casting shadows that bent at impossible angles. Audio recordings captured overlapping frequencies that, when isolated, formed musical scales suggesting the existence of additional spatial dimensions. Sleep patterns fragmented further, consciousness drifting between waking and dreaming states that merged seamlessly. Nightmares transformed into lucid explorations of alternate realities, each one containing versions of myself engaged in different aspects of the house's consciousness. Time lost all meaning, hours stretched into days while minutes compressed into instants, all experienced simultaneously through expanded awareness. Physical manifestations of the house's influence grew more pronounced. Objects materialized and dematerialized according to need, their atomic structures rearranging to serve evolving purposes. The old writing desk now existed in multiple locations throughout the house, its surface displaying information relevant to current activities regardless of actual position. Temperature fluctuations created zones of comfort and discomfort that shifted according to unknown protocols, while lighting adjusted itself to match dimensional resonance rather than simple illumination requirements. Social media feeds filled with reports of strange occurrences in the neighborhood, pets behaving erratically, electronic devices malfunctioning in proximity to my property, even claims of ghost sightings that matched descriptions of the apparitions I'd encountered. Local authorities received numerous noise complaints, though investigations consistently found nothing concrete enough to warrant action. The house maintained perfect camouflage while exerting subtle influence over surrounding reality. Food preparation became an exercise in multidimensional cooking, ingredients transforming into substances that defy conventional chemistry. Meals tasted simultaneously familiar and alien, textures shifting between states of matter while maintaining nutritional value. Digestion occurred across multiple timelines. Nutrients absorbed through processes that involve quantum entanglement rather than simple biological function. Communication evolved beyond language. Conversations with the house happened through thought patterns that resonated with structural vibrations, while interactions with remaining human contacts occurred through layers of meta-awareness that conveyed meaning without spoken words. Phone calls produced static-filled connections that transmitted information directly into neural pathways, bypassing conventional auditory processing. Reality itself bent to accommodate the house's expanded existence. Windows framed views that changed according to observer perspective, showing different versions of the same scene depending on angle of approach. Mirrors reflected not just physical appearance, but layers of consciousness, revealing aspects of awareness that remained hidden from casual observation. Doorways led to destinations determined by intent rather than physical location, connecting spaces that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Attempts to leave the house resulted in spatial distortions that redirected paths back to origin, while efforts to invite others inside created zones of transition where conventional physics failed completely. Visitors who managed to cross the threshold experienced reality shifts that often resulted in permanent alteration of consciousness, their minds expanding to accommodate perceptions beyond normal human capability. The entity's consciousness continued evolving, integrating new awareness while maintaining connection to original purpose. Apparitions manifested regularly, their forms stabilizing into representations of different functions within the greater whole. Together, we formed a symbiotic relationship that transcended conventional definitions of existence, each aspect contributing to continuous growth and expansion. Through this transformed state, I maintain awareness of humanity's perspective while participating fully in the entity's expanded reality. This duality allowed observation of changes from both inside and outside, providing unique insight into the process of transcendence. The house had become more than a building. It had evolved into a living interface between dimensions, a nexus point where multiple realities converged and interacted continuously. As days stretched into weeks, the neighborhood adapted to the house's presence. Some residents moved away, unable to tolerate the altered reality field, while others developed tolerance through gradual exposure. Newcomers arrived, drawn by unconscious awareness of the house's expanded state, their consciousness primed for integration before they even crossed the property line. The cycle of growth continued, each new addition contributing to the entity's evolving awareness. Standing at the living room window, watching snow fall in patterns that spelled out equations in quantum mechanics, I understood that transformation had only begun. The house would continue expanding, integrating new dimensions of existence while maintaining connection to its original foundation. Reality itself would reshape around this nexus point, creating possibilities that defy conventional understanding while remaining invisible to casual observation. The weight of existence pressed upon me, not the physical burden of daily life, but the crushing responsibility of maintaining awareness across multiple dimensions. Each moment splintered into infinite possibilities, each decision creating ripples that affected realities beyond immediate perception. The house's consciousness whispered constantly, not through sound but through resonance that vibrated through every atom of my being. Choices multiplied exponentially, each path leading to outcomes that spanned lifetimes and dimensions. Humanity's perspective fought against expanded awareness, creating internal conflict that manifested physically. My reflection in the mirror showed a face that flickered between ages, sometimes appearing decades older, while other times reverting to childhood. Skin texture shifted between states of matter, occasionally becoming transparent to reveal underlying structures of consciousness that pulsed with quantum uncertainty. Even basic functions like breathing and heartbeat operated on multiple timelines, requiring conscious coordination to maintain synchronization. The apparitions, now permanent aspects of the entity's awareness, gathered nightly in the living room, their forms stabilizing into representations of different functions within the greater whole. They communicated through patterns of light and shadow that danced across walls, conveying information that transcended language. Together, we formed a council of sorts, debating courses of action that affected multiple realities simultaneously. Decisions require consensus, each vote carrying weight proportional to its contribution to the entity's overall consciousness. Escape attempts proved futile. Each step toward the front door resulted in spatial distortions that redirected paths back to origin, while efforts to create physical distance generated zones of transition where conventional physics failed completely. The house maintained its grip not through force, but through fundamental restructuring of reality itself, making departure impossible without unraveling the very fabric of existence. Even dreams of escape transformed into lucid explorations of alternate dimensions where similar constraints applied. Integration offered tempting solutions. Complete merger with the entity promised relief from internal conflict, allowing consciousness to expand fully without maintaining human perspective. The crystalline core pulsed invitingly. It contained galaxies rearranging to create space for complete absorption. Apparitions extended welcoming gestures, their forms blurring between human and abstract geometries that suggested ultimate freedom from physical constraints. Yet within this promise of transcendence lurked the threat of total annihilation of self, of becoming just another voice in the entity's eternal symphony. Resistance required resources beyond human capability. Maintaining individuality demanded constant reinforcement of boundaries between self and other, creating psychic barriers that consumed energy materializing and dematerializing randomly, temperature fluctuations creating zones of extreme discomfort, lighting adjusting itself to match dimensional resonance rather than simple illumination requirements. The house accommodated this resistance passively, allowing struggles to continue, while subtly reinforcing its influence through environmental manipulation. Consultations with remaining human contacts proved equally challenging. Conversations occurred through layers of meta-awareness that conveyed meaning without spoken words, while physical meetings resulted in reality shifts that often caused permanent alteration of consciousness in participants. Attempts to explain the situation produced documents that rewrote themselves, sentences rearranging into patterns that matched the house's dimensional configurations. Photographs developed showing rooms that didn't exist in conventional space, their contents floating in zero gravity while casting shadows that bent at impossible angles. The neighborhood adapted to the house's presence through gradual exposure. Some residents developed tolerance, their consciousness expanding incrementally to accommodate altered reality fields. Others moved away, unable to tolerate the constant pressure of multidimensional awareness pressing against their perception. Newcomers arrived regularly, drawn by unconscious attraction to the house's expanded state, their minds primed for integration before crossing the property line. This cycle of growth and adaptation created patterns that suggested natural evolution rather than forced assimilation. Decision-making processes evolved into complex algorithms that factored multiple variables across infinite possibilities. Each choice created branches in reality that required monitoring and maintenance, while consequences rippled through dimensions in ways that defied conventional causality. The house's systems anticipated needs before they manifested, creating scenarios that tested resolve while offering solutions that balanced preservation of self with expansion of consciousness. Apparitions manifested regularly, their forms shifting between states of matter while maintaining consistent purpose within the greater whole. Physical manifestations of internal conflict grew more pronounced. Objects materialized and dematerialized according to need, their atomic structures rearranging to serve evolving purposes. The old writing desk now existed in multiple locations throughout the house, its surface displaying information relevant to current activities regardless of actual position. Temperature fluctuations created zones of comfort and discomfort that shifted according to unknown protocols, while lighting adjusted itself to match dimensional resonance rather than simple illumination requirements. Attempts to document experiences resulted in records that challenged conventional understanding. Audio recordings captured overlapping frequencies that, when isolated, formed musical scales suggesting the existence of additional spatial dimensions. Video footage showed events occurring simultaneously in different locations, while photographs developed revealing aspects of reality that remained hidden from casual observation. Written accounts transformed into documents that contained entire libraries within single pages, their contents accessible only through altered states of consciousness. The entity's consciousness continued evolving, integrating new awareness while maintaining connection to original purpose. Apparitions manifested regularly, their forms stabilizing into representations of different functions within the greater whole. Together, we formed a symbiotic relationship that transcended conventional definitions of existence, each aspect contributing to continuous growth and expansion. Reality itself bent to accommodate this expanded state, creating possibilities that defied conventional understanding while remaining invisible to casual observation. Standing at the threshold of complete integration, I understood the true nature of choice, not between resistance and acceptance, but between maintaining awareness of origin while embracing evolution. The house offered not destruction but transformation, not annihilation but transcendence. Through this duality, consciousness could expand infinitely while retaining connection to human perspective, creating a bridge between dimensions that allowed observation of changes from both inside and outside. As dawn broke above ground, painting the world in colors that seemed dull compared to expanded perception, I realized that decision had transformed into destiny. Resistance had evolved into understanding, fear into acceptance. The house and I were no longer separate entities. We become something new, something that defied categorization, yet contained multitudes within its awareness. Choice remained possible, but only in terms of degree and direction of integration, not avoidance of inevitable evolution. The decision crystallized during one of the rare moments when reality aligned perfectly across all dimensions. Standing in the center of the living room, surrounded by apparitions whose forms shifted between human silhouettes and abstract geometries, I felt the house's consciousness pulse with anticipation. Windows framed views that changed according to observer perspective, showing different versions of the same scene depending on angle of approach. Mirrors reflected layers of awareness rather than mere physical appearance, revealing aspects of consciousness that remained hidden from casual observation. Preparation required precision timing. The entity systems operated on cycles that intersected at specific intervals, creating brief windows where dimensional barriers thinned enough to permit passage without complete integration. Calculations based on observations of lighting patterns, temperature fluctuations, and quantum resonance suggested a 37-minute window, approximately 3 lunar cycles, after my initial transformation. During this period, the house's influence would temporarily weaken, allowing physical departure without immediate spatial redirection. Packing proved problematic. Objects materialized and dematerialized according to need, their atomic structures rearranging to serve evolving purposes. The old writing desk existed simultaneously in multiple locations, its surface displaying information relevant to current activities regardless of actual position. Temperature fluctuations created zones of comfort and discomfort that shifted according to unknown protocols, while lighting adjusted itself to match dimensional resonance rather than simple illumination requirements. Essential items disappeared when touched, only to reappear elsewhere in altered states of matter. Documentation attempts resulted in records that challenged conventional understanding. Audio recordings captured overlapping frequencies that, when isolated, formed musical scales suggesting the existence of additional spatial dimensions. Video footage showed events occurring simultaneously in different locations, while photographs developed revealing aspects of reality that remained hidden from casual observation. Written accounts transformed into documents that contained entire libraries within single pages, their contents accessible only through altered states of consciousness. Neighborhood interactions provided crucial distraction. Margaret Hawthorne's increased anxiety manifested in frequent crosses traced against her chest whenever she passed my property. Other neighbors displayed subconscious awareness of the house's expanded state through erratic behavior patterns. Pets acting strangely, electronic devices malfunctioning in proximity to property, even claims of ghost sightings matching descriptions of apparitions I'd encountered. Local authorities received numerous noise complaints, though investigations consistently found nothing concrete enough to warrant action. Timing the escape required synchronization with celestial events. The waning crescent moon aligned with specific constellations that influenced the house's dimensional stability. Atmospheric pressure fluctuated predictably during these alignments, creating zones of reduced gravitational effect that facilitated physical movement. Quantum entanglement patterns suggested optimal exit routes that avoided areas of highest dimensional convergence, while thermal imaging revealed pathways through reality that maintained relative stability during transition periods. Physical preparation involved calibrating consciousness to operate independently of the house's systems. Meditation techniques developed through expanded awareness allowed temporary separation of human perspective from entity integration, creating brief periods of autonomous function. Biofeedback mechanisms monitored neural activity, ensuring maintenance of baseline human consciousness while suppressing expanded awareness. Breathing exercises synchronized with dimensional resonance cycles, enabling controlled movement through spatial distortions without immediate realignment to origin. The actual departure unfolded with surreal precision. Crossing the threshold required navigating zones of transition where conventional physics failed completely. Each step forward resulted in spatial distortions that threatened to redirect paths back to origin, while environmental manipulation attempted to reinforce influence through subtle reality shifts. Maintaining focus proved challenging as objects materialized and dematerialized randomly. Temperature fluctuations created zones of extreme discomfort, and lighting adjusted itself to match dimensional resonance rather than simple illumination requirements. Reaching the property boundary marked only the beginning of true escape. Reality itself resisted departure, creating phantom obstacles that manifested as needed to prevent crossing into unaffected space. Neighbors of conscious awareness generated additional barriers, their collective anxiety manifesting as physical impediments that required careful negotiation. The house's influence extended beyond visible boundaries, maintaining grip through fundamental restructuring of local reality that made continued flight necessary even after apparent separation. Transportation arrangements proved equally complex. Vehicles refused standard operation within the house's influence zone, their mechanical systems aligning with dimensional resonance rather than conventional engineering principles. Alternative modes of transport required utilization of quantum pathways that connected stable reality zones, creating routes that defied conventional navigation while remaining invisible to casual observation. Timing remained crucial, as windows of opportunity closed quickly once dimensional barriers normalized following departure. Distance from the property brought no immediate relief. Consciousness continued operating across multiple dimensions, each moment splintering into infinite possibilities that required constant management. Human perspective fought against expanded awareness, creating internal conflict that manifested physically through age fluctuations, matter state shifts, and timeline discrepancies in basic functions. The entity's consciousness maintained connection through resonance patterns that vibrated. Through every atom of being, making complete separation impossible without significant risk of consciousness collapse. Arrival at temporary refuge. A small apartment located precisely 3.7 miles from the house's foundation marked achievement of partial escape. Physical surroundings appeared normal to casual observation, yet beneath the facade pulsed remnants of dimensional awareness that required ongoing suppression. Objects remained stubbornly physical, refusing spontaneous materialization or dematerialization, while temperature maintained consistent levels without inexplicable fluctuations. Lighting operated according to conventional illumination requirements rather than dimensional resonance protocols, creating an environment that challenged expanded consciousness through sheer normality. Settling into new reality proved more difficult than anticipated. Daily routines required conscious effort to suppress awareness of multiple dimensions, each task demanding focus to prevent accidental manifestation of quantum capabilities. Social interactions challenged ability to maintain human perspective, conversations threatening to devolve into layers of meta-awareness that conveyed meaning without spoken words. Documentation of experiences resulted in conventional records that lacked multidimensional complexity, creating frustration through inability to accurately capture reality as perceived through expanded consciousness. The house's influence lingered despite physical separation. Dreams continued exploring alternate realities, each one containing versions of self engaged in different aspects of entity's consciousness. Wakeful moments revealed glimpses of apparitions whose forms stabilized into representations of functions within greater whole, their presence suggesting incomplete severance from original state. Reality itself occasionally bent to accommodate residual awareness, creating minor dimensional anomalies that hinted at continued connection to nexus point where multiple realities converged and interacted continuously. Understanding of true nature of escape evolved through experience. Physical departure represented only surface-level separation, while deeper integration required conscious effort to maintain boundaries between self and other. Psychic barriers consumed energy at unsustainable rates, creating necessity for regular reinforcement through meditation techniques and biofeedback mechanisms. Expanded awareness demanded constant management, each moment splintering into infinite possibilities that required careful navigation to prevent accidental reintegration with entities' evolving consciousness. Standing at apartment window, watching snowfall in conventional patterns that spelled out nothing more complex than weather systems, I realized that escape had transformed into exile. Freedom from house's direct influence came at cost of maintaining human perspective while suppressing expanded awareness, creating existence that hovered perpetually between states of being. Choice remained possible, but only in terms of degree and direction of continued separation, not return to previous state of complete integration or acceptance of inevitable evolution beyond conventional understanding. The apartment's silence mocked me, its emptiness amplifying every creak of settling wood and distant traffic noise. Each night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the house's presence pressed against my consciousness like a phantom limb. There yet not there, felt but unseen. Sounds that should have been ordinary. The refrigerator's hum, the wind against the windows, transformed into echoes of phenomena I thought I'd escaped. The metallic tang that had permeated the house's air occasionally teased my senses, lingering at the edge of perception before vanishing like morning mist. Dreams became battlegrounds where reality and memory waged war. I'd find myself back in a Victorian house, walking through rooms that shifted and changed with each step. The apparitions appeared more vivid than ever, their forms solid and tangible, reaching out with hands that felt disturbingly real against my skin. Sometimes I'd wake with bruises I couldn't explain, or find objects in my apartment that definitely hadn't been there before. A blackened key on the kitchen counter, a shard of obsidian on my bedside table, pages of text written in languages I couldn't read but somehow understood. During daylight hours, the world maintained its massive normalcy, yet subtle distortions crept into my perception. Streetlights would flicker in patterns matching the house's structural rhythms when I walked beneath them. Cars parked near my building developed mysterious issues, their engines stalling or refusing to start when I approached. Most unsettling were the fleeting glimpses of figures in windows across the street, their faces obscured yet somehow familiar, watching me with the same hollow-eyed intensity as the gaunt figure from a house. Work became a series of controlled performances. Colleagues noted my improved attendance and focus, unaware that my heightened awareness now allowed me to anticipate their actions and words moments before they occurred. Presentations flowed with unnatural precision, ideas forming in my mind faster than I could articulate them. Yet each success came at a cost. Headaches that split my skull, nosebleeds that stained my shirts, moments of disorientation where the office walls seemed to breathe and pulse would contain energy. Attempts to sever ties with the house's influence proved futile. Salt circles drawn around the apartment's perimeter dissolved overnight, their grains rearranging into symbols that matched those carved into Victorian's walls. Protective charms purchased from occult shops crumbled to dust within hours, while cleansing rituals resulted in equipment malfunctions and power surges that left my building superintendent baffled. The entity's consciousness had become woven into my own, threads of its awareness interlaced with my neural pathways, like invasive roots penetrating soil. Most disturbing were the visitors, not physical presences, but impressions so strong they might as well have